animators and artists, and welcome to today's Toon Boom interview. This week we're speaking with recent graduate Kira Davis about their graduate film, Toil and Trouble. Kira, welcome to the stream.
Hi, it's really nice to be here.
It's great to have you here. So for the viewers joining us today, this is a live interview. So if you have questions about student films, feel free to let us know in the chat and we might ask a question on the air. To start, Kira, how would you describe Toil and Trouble and what inspired this film?
As a project, I really wanted Toil and Trouble to be something that was really sweet and kind and happy. There's lots of student films that are very serious and really kind of sometimes very heartbreaking, and I really love those films. They're fantastic, but I personally wanted to make something that made me feel a lot of joy. And so that was my biggest point when I went into brainstorming, is something that was very kind.
And what was the development process on this film like, and how did you approach developing the characters and story?
So in our last, so at AUB we have a 3-year program, and so in the end of our second year, we develop a pitch for our final unit, and so that was what the whole process of developing the film to begin with was developing this pitch to be shown to the rest of our class to be hopefully made into a film. And so I wanted to do a character that I really liked, and so this character was one I've actually had since 2016, and so I wanted to make something around her because I thought she was really cute and thought we could make something simple, and it had to be 2 minutes, so it can't be something like super robust. So I just want to make something that was really fun and had music as well. I didn't want any dialogue.
Would you be able to show our audience the pitch document that you made?
Yeah. So here's part of it. It's not all of it because it doesn't have like the animatic, but I really had to push it down into like 10 or 15 slides that just kind of had exactly what I wanted to do, and as well as what I could possibly do and what people could help with. Because the main thing was you wanted to basically hire your other students to help with this project and make them want to work on it. So I started with like a premise and like who it was aimed for. Like ours was for kids and cartoons, and I really thought of it as a kind of reimagining of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and music was super important. Our schools actually worked with the composer that I really wanted on this film from the very beginning. So they worked with the blasting company before, and so I was super stoked that we actually got to get them for our composer. And so like we went from like the premise to like mood boards, just to give a general idea of what like these characters are like. Just having any kind of like references that people can use to like instantly kind of understand what this character is. Because you can see like a big difference between like the starry-eyed little witch girl and the more stern teacher character. And there were, these are our story beats that I originally had. It completely changes after we actually went into development, because the story changed and we found better ways to tell it. But this was what I originally had in mind. But I'm so happy with how it did change, because it really like elevated the story, made it much more clear. And we had like the character with like some of her concepts and just little sketches that I had, because she's just very fun to draw. I really liked, originally she had like this kind of like little sweatshirt and like just a little dress. But eventually I thought like I wanted to really kind of give some context to her design. So I went looking for like European folk costumes and those kind of outfits that just have some really interesting patterns on them, and looked for those. And I really think I found like what I was looking for with that, because it worked for Dorothea as well. She looks a little bit more like a maid in this one. So like it definitely had a good progression for how her concept developed. Then there was just like this production still, which is basically, I think I just drew this in Procreate. It wasn't actually like, we were supposed to actually like make it in the program so it would be possible to recreate, but I didn't have time for that because developing a pitch in I think it was 12 weeks was very difficult. So that was something we had to do later on.
And if you don't mind me asking, how many artists worked on Toil and Trouble, and how long did the film take to make?
So at the beginning, we had 8 people on our team, which was actually one more than kind of the standard for the rest of the films. There were 12 productions in my year, and most of them had 6 or 7, but we had 8 just because we had one extra. And that actually ended up helping us out a lot because we needed all the help we could get. We ended up being a very ambitious film, like with everything that went into it, from the backgrounds to the compositing. And the film actually took a year longer than most of the other films in our year, mostly because of COVID. It really hit us hard, and a lot of us had burnout. We lost some of our teammates just because they had other obligations once we graduated. So we had to kind of make do with that and reschedule things. And actually, at one point, we lost half of our backgrounds because of the hard drive failure. So that was,
wow.
Yeah, and that was a big bummer as well. But we pushed through that and used what we could. And we had people come and help us. And that was really amazing. Like, we had a bunch of other people from my year who came and were willing to like help with some cleanup here and there, or help painting some backgrounds. And that just took a lot of the pressure off of those of us who were left from the original team.
So before asking any other questions, I just want to say congratulations on completing a film during a pandemic. That is amazing.
Yeah, all 12 of us did. And there was one other film that finished at the same time as us. And I'm really just so proud of like all of our graduating productions and all of the teams that just worked so hard to finish them when they did. It was definitely difficult. We were all very stressed for a long time.
I can see in the next slide you have sort of a picture of how the characters progressed from the initial pitch to the characters used in production. Did you want to talk briefly about some of the choices that were made and how the characters developed?
Yeah, so this one on the left, these were the designs that I made for the pitch. Since I had this character, Maybelle, I had her since about 2016. I kind of knew what I wanted for her. Actually, for the pitch, she actually looks a lot different from how I usually drew her, just because I thought maybe this would be more simple to draw. And this was just how the character Dorothea, the teacher, ended up. And I was super willing to like change lots with Dorothea because I didn't really know what I wanted from her yet. And so, but with Maybelle, I definitely had more of an initial idea. I was, I guess, less willing to change some design aspects of her, but I did want to make her, I wanted everyone to feel like happy with those designs and like ready to draw them and liking them. And so when we went into production, I wanted to know like if anyone had any ideas for the characters, if they had things that they would like to see on them, like to change, and just kind of like concepts. And so we had people draw them, and I would look at them and see like, oh, I think we could add like this part. Like, I think these little sleeve decorations, one of my teammates drew those, and I thought that was a really cool little motif to add, and different face shapes and different eyes, like much more expressive eyes that worked a lot better for the characters. And some of like these designs, I don't actually think the design on the dress actually ended up in the actual full turnaround. Yeah, it would be very hard to track that in animating, so we took it out. And so we mostly wanted it to be easier to animate, and I think that worked out a lot better for the turnaround than the originals.
And would you be able to take our audience on a tour of a scene from Toil and Trouble?
Yeah, so I have a scene prepared. This was a really fun shot. It had a really like interesting angle. It changed quite a bit from the original. Actually, I can bring that up a little bit. So like, I won't really show the thumbnails because they are very small and made in Sharpie. But you can see here, like from this image, this was like our original storyboard from my pitch, and we did this on the first day. We just put sticky notes and thought of things that we could change and ways we could do it, like adding things, and in this specific scene, it is right around here. I think I might have even said this. I already knew from the beginning that I wanted a more interesting angle, because she just comes in and it's just pretty straight on, and I'm like, I want something more interesting, but I couldn't do that myself. So we had our lovely layout artist be like, let's do something like this high angle, and that was really fantastic. And so this was how it kind of changed from there. It went, this was the previous shot, so this cool scene, and then this nice high angle from the final storyboard, and I think it was a lot more impactful. And this was what our layout artist came up with, was this really cool high angle that would really show that power difference between the big smoke monster and the character. You want to have your autosave on. I did not have autosave on for a long time, and it did cause issues. So if you're using Toon Boom, turn that on in preferences. It's a great thing.
Yeah, lost work is not fun.
It's just heart-wrenching. So what we started with was actually a reference video. And so, because it's a very difficult angle, and so we have this character that we're looking at from this kind of foreshortened view. And so we went into a stairwell and just tried to match it as best as we could. And I put it on a peg so it could like end where I wanted it to. It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to have the motion that I want and the angle I wanted. And so from there, we did like some like keyframes like based on it. And so like it's like the same kind of thing, but it is at least working. And
it's really cool to use video reference.
It was so helpful, especially for this scene. Like I don't think I could have like even considered starting the scene without a video reference. And it's like easy to put it in there as well, and you can just take like, because obviously video reference is not at the same frames per second as regular animation. So like you can just take things out and just use the poses that you need. And so like we do like the actual keyframes after that. And this is like where my part of the animation ended, just because I had so much to do. I had other things I had to go work on. So I shipped it off to someone else, and they did a fantastic job. So I can go from that part to the rough animation. And I'll say now that this isn't how I normally like set up a scene in Toon Boom. I don't have every single part of it like right next to each other. It was just easier to set it up like this for the sake of like this kind of showcase. Normally I just save different versions of the file once I get to a different step, just so you can go back just in case. And so this was the rough animation. This was done by one of the people that helped us out during the summer, Serene Saravanan. And she did a really great job of kind of bringing to life those keys and just having lots of fun with it. And let me know if I'm going too fast. I know I talk like a mile a minute.
No, this is really cool.
And so from that point on, we went into cleanup. And I have some of these, the first like 2 or 3 frames, I took out the color for it, just so I could like show like what the lines were before. We used like a custom brush for Toil and Trouble. It wasn't like one we like downloaded. We just used lots of the Toon Boom. Oh, what are they called? I'm so sorry.
Preset brushes?
Preset, yeah. So I think ours started with like the dark charcoal, and then we just changed some of the tips and some of the little like things here and there, and we just came up with this nice little textured brush. We did run into some issues with it though, because textured brushes are a little bit harder to fill in with color, because it makes it harder for the vectorization process when you're putting the color to line art to color. But it was something to work around, and it got easier as we got kind of more confident with our lines as well.
Was there any sort of problem solving you had to do for the cleanup process to make things consistent?
Yeah, I made this really long and kind of obnoxious cleanup guide to like help with like the cleanup process. We were all still like learning Toon Boom, and so I was just trying to figure everything out as I went. And when I ran into an issue, I put it into the guide. So I was like, if this is happening to you, you did this, and so do it like this instead, because that's something I ran into. Like for example, if you didn't flatten your if you didn't flatten your lines, it'll make a huge mess when you create your color art. And so it was a lot of just kind of running into problems and fixing them and just trying to make it so that doesn't happen again. Let's see. Is there anything else you want to see on cleanup, or should I go on to like the next part?
Yeah, let's talk about compositing.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely like the longest part. So yeah, there's definitely more I can kind of go into on compositing because it was more of a process. The rest was kind of like the standard process of going from rough to clean up to color. But after we had it colored, I really wanted to have this certain look for our compositing and for the film as a whole. And I kind of wanted these soft like lighting, and like I was really inspired by Klaus, and I was like, ooh, how did Klaus do their stuff? And I found out that they actually had a custom made plugin that is like an AI that can track their lines. And so that wasn't something we could do as a student film. So we had to find another way to do that where it could have maybe the same kind of like idea of like kind of this like nice soft lighting, but not as sophisticated. And definitely not as time consuming, because that was one of the big issues, was finding a way to do this lighting that wasn't time consuming. When we did our first production shot, it was actually hand painted, the lighting. So we just had like a highlight layer and then a drawing plugged into it, and then I was hand painting the lighting on every frame. I'm like, this is gonna be terrible. This is gonna take way too long. So I wanted to find a way to expedite that, and the way I found out was through using highlight layers and apply peg transformation. This is where it's going to get a little bit more technical. But so I'll go first with, let's see, the head of the monster, since that will make more sense. And so we have like up here, we have like the actual drawing, and that kind of acts as like the basic shape mat for like the rest of the highlights, because they're all layered on top of each other, which gives it that kind of softer look. And you can have lots of different lighting like choices. Like you can have like your rim light or your fill light, and it can act as those while not necessarily being like 3D or anything. And so like you have your highlight, and you can actually barely see this one just because it is kind of a small one. But when you put the peg onto the apply peg, you can put it kind of anywhere you want. Oh, and one of the things with this was it did slow down our compositing a bit, because you actually have to do pretty much all of it in render view, because I'll show you what it looks like at the end when in the OpenGL view, when all of these are on top of each other. It's actually kind of fascinating, but really weird to look at. But so you can move around the peg so that you can change the lighting and make it like kind of like wherever you want. And you could even like keyframe that out, which I had to do for several scenes. Like there's a scene where Maybelle like goes around the cauldron, but the cauldron is like casting this big pink glow on her. And so when she runs around it, it has to follow her. And so since it's connected to her, I actually had to move the lighting through the peg based on her movements. And so I just keyframed that out so that it would follow her in the correct source.
That's a really clever use of like masks and pegs.
Yeah, it was a little bit to figure out, especially like when I started adding cutters into it, so that like if you wanted like one half of the body to be lit up but the other half of the body not to be lit up, you can cut that part off and do some funky little stuff with that as well. There was some really difficult and interesting compositing I had to do on the monster, because usually the head was separate from the body, and so you would actually have to kind of connect those when you had the lighting like on top of each other, because it would like cut off real sharp. And so I would have to use a cutter and then just kind of hand paint in with like a soft brush to blend them together. That was where a lot of the time went. But so to create like the more like kind of like softer stuff, we would like just put more lighting like on top of each other and just keep moving it around and putting it like where we needed it to be. It's like you can put that and make it a little bit lighter if you wanted that more lighter there or darker there. And it's definitely kind of like fine-tuned. Like you have to get it from the right angle, and it doesn't always work perfectly because of just how the shape is, because obviously it's just using a ply peg. So it's just exactly that shape, but a little bit to the left.
Yeah, you're sort of working with the silhouette of the object.
Mm-hmm. And so it's basically just like a bunch of rim lighting, but if you like mess with and like have kind of unique radiuses and make it softer or harder, like that will change a lot of what the lighting is looking like. And you can make it like brighter with like the intensity, and that's a lot. And changing the color will also kind of indicate different things. And then after that, it's usually like a tone layer, and this one's like always pretty like intense, but it adds like more of like kind of that shadow. And I usually like go back and forth of whether or not I want it to be like inverted or regular matte. And it was mostly just kind of like figuring it out like as I went, just kind of messing with each little individual part and finally adjusting each part at once. But when I got it where I wanted, then I could move to the next part.
So you've touched on like thumbnail, storyboards, rough animation, cleanup and color. Just because of the way that student films are, you wind up doing a lot of the pipeline. What parts of the process are you most interested in?
Yeah, I really ended up doing pretty much at least a little bit of every little part of the film in the pipeline. At one point I was painting backgrounds, and then other points I was doing cleanup. And I really enjoy pretty much every aspect of the pipeline. I find it all really fun. I really enjoy compositing, just like I think it works with my brain really well. I really like the node view. I know lots of people can be really intimidated by it because like you don't know where to start. And that's where I really have to like thank one of our techs, Dorian. He was like fantastic at like really giving us a breakdown of just like how to do lighting. And we just did like a simple like highlight, like the same kind of way of just like an easy using the apply peg and just like moving it to the side and having that rim light. And it was like with that where I just kind of expanded on it and added another one on top and another one on that. And that kind of just created the scheme of what we wanted. But yeah, I like all parts of the pipeline. I could really enjoy doing like anything in it.
And how did this film change during that sort of process where you're figuring out like, okay, here's how we're going to do lighting, and here's how we're going to do all these different elements? Did you find like as you're working on it, some of the project evolved or changed?
Yeah, we definitely we had to make lots of like compromises here and there. We had to change the story. Originally there wasn't even a tree in the layout of the cottage. So like the instigating factor is the bottle of the potion falling into the cauldron. And so that originally, like, I think it fell off of a bookshelf in my pitch storyboard, and like we didn't really like how that worked logistically. We couldn't figure out how to move that in the layout where it would make sense how it would fall into it. And so we had to kind of problem solve around that, like how are we going to make this potion fall into this cauldron from a place that makes sense? And so we're like, let's add a tree. I'm not even sure who actually had that idea, but it was like, that was one of the biggest changes, and it worked so well because it made such a beautiful set piece. And it was very like fun to draw. And And like, yeah, we definitely did make like other compromises. Like, I think we did originally want to do like the hand painted lighting, and we wanted to do kind of some like even like more like fully painted backgrounds. But like, you definitely have to keep things more simple and find places where you can simplify.
Yeah, well, in terms of one thing that I thought was really ambitious in the film was the character design for the mentor has these earrings that have sort of a wind chime design on them, where I think it's like a triangle and 3 cylinders,
Mhm.
and just the head turns where your animators are figuring out how those volumes work in space. I
Yeah.
thought was really impressive.
Yeah, I think the scenes that we have her like really like showing off those earrings where they really wiggle around were really fantastic. The way that the animators did that, I did some cleanup on some of them. I don't think I actually animated them. Whew. But we didn't really think about that when we made the earrings, and then like when we started animating those scenes, we're like, oh no, this is actually quite a difficult little object to kind of figure out in your mind. Like sometimes to simplify it, they could just move straight back and forth, and that would work okay. And sometimes I think in one scene they're literally just a little triangle, and so there's definitely places where we want to like show them off, where we have like her like in like a mid close up, and like that's where we want them to look really cool and swing in like the right ways. And then there's other places where they don't really need to be the center of like fun attention.
See, when I saw it, I thought your team was just flexing. Like, yeah, we can do this. But it's amazing to hear that you're able to problem solve and find ways to include it in the scenes. I wanted to ask also, like, which scenes were the most difficult and which ones are the most proud of? Sometimes they're the same scenes, sometimes they're different scenes, but were there any scenes that you found were really challenging and that you had to really problem solve to find your way
Yeah.
around?
Yeah, there's actually several of them. We called them like our problem scenes. There's one scene of the it's a panning up of the tree, and the tree is actually like wiggling, and like the branches are wiggling and the potions are wiggling. And I think every single one of our animators had that scene assigned to them at one point, and we just kept moving it around because no one wanted to even attempt it. It was just so difficult to even comprehend how we were going to do it. We started like maybe trying to hand animate it because that could work maybe, and then we're like, that's going to be too difficult. And eventually what we came up with was, and this was after learning other techniques, and one of our animators learning more rigging. And so we actually rigged the background of the tree. So the tree was separate from like the background, and the branches were separate from the tree. And so the tree itself was, I think, its own little rig, and then the branches were like kinematic outputs, and then the bottles themselves were actually hand animated. And so those that was definitely a shot that just required a lot of thinking and problem solving, and it turned out really well.
It's amazing. So we mentioned a little bit earlier that this film was made during the pandemic, which is still ongoing. But how did you approach remote collaboration on this project, and what kind of challenges cropped up?
So one of the biggest challenges we had was I'm from the U.S., and after we graduated, I moved back home to Oregon, and the rest of my team was still in the UK. So we had an 8-hour time difference between my team and me as like the director and the producer at that point. So that created quite a big kind of gap of people not knowing what they're working on, and just not being able to communicate because someone's asleep. And I think we ended up doing most of our meetings where it was like 8 p.m. at night for them and like midday for me, since my brain does not wake up super early. But that was one of the most difficult things, is working through that time difference. And anyone who can do that, I have the biggest kudos to them, because it is so difficult to keep that communication up, especially if it's just sending one text and then you get another text in the morning, and then they get another text that morning. And so it definitely slowed down some communication. And as well, like because we were working through the pandemic and after we graduated, at that point, like we really considered it a passion project. Like the film itself wasn't created; we had our own hand in, and that's what we all focused on at the last few months of our actual school. So we focused on that, and then after we graduated and we're all home, we were like, I guess we can start the film again, and that that takes a little bit of motivation in trying to get that back there, because it's a daunting task to restart that project and continue where we left off. So it took a while to get back into it. But we eventually did, and we had lots of people helping as well, like lots of my former classmates and even classmates that were a year below us offered to help with like cleanup or painting backgrounds, and that was so incredibly helpful just because it took so much pressure off of the rest of our remaining team.
Yeah, I think that first off, I'm really excited that you're all able to complete the film. How much of the film was completed by the time that you graduated, and how much more had to be done afterwards?
So that is a good question. We were definitely very far behind by the time we graduated. Like our before the pandemic, before like COVID and everything, our films were supposed to be due at the beginning or so of June, maybe mid-June, around the time that we graduated and something like that. And then COVID hit, and so they eventually moved our film deadlines to August, and we didn't hit that deadline, not even close. We hadn't really started compositing. We still had lots of rough animation to do, and we still had most of our cleanup to do. And that was a big hit to like motivation, just knowing how much we still had to do after all of this time. And like there wasn't really much we could do about that, just because it is a team effort, and so we had lots of people that just needed to get their stuff in, or we need updates, or we needed to simplify something, and so that was really difficult. But we found our ways around it, and I'm happy that we took the extra time, even though it was like it was moving at snail pace, but we got there in the end, and we finished with the rest of our class.
Do you have advice for students who will be planning their thesis film projects this year?
I actually have some stuff written down that I want to. Yeah, so like whether like you're working with a team or like on your own, having like a focus early on for a dedicated pipeline, like especially your compositing process, is really important. Like one of the things I don't think we did super well in pre-production was we kind of half-assed our production shot. And so we just tried to get it done as quick as possible, because we had a film review where we were going to show all of our stuff we were working on, and that was one of the things we needed. So we did it really quick, and we didn't really learn what we needed to learn. And so we didn't actually have that process ready for when we started production. So we were still learning it during production, which caused delays. And so finding like a production shot in your film that like kind of encompasses everything you're trying to do, like has all the techniques you're thinking about, like implementing like the lighting or anything that might be particularly difficult, that might be the one to like try and really focus on, and getting that exactly how you want it. That way you can just follow it as you go, and you know exactly what you're doing.
Sort of a solve your problems early type of approach.
Yes, solve your problems early. Like at the end of our film, we have the characters covered in dust, and I knew before we even started working that was going to be a problem. I did not know how I was going to do that, because I thought the only way you could do it is like it looks like a screen and the characters are moving behind this still PNG of dust that just doesn't look like it's on the characters. And so I knew that was going to be an issue, and I didn't do anything about it because I had other things I was working on. But I ended up not working on that until like not figuring out how to do it until about like 2 months before I finished it. I figured it all out at the end, and it was definitely a difficult process. It involved color selectors and cutters and all sorts of weird little compositing tricks, and blending notes I think were also part of it. And it would have just really helped to know that beforehand. Also, so I wouldn't have had to do it alone.
Do you have that scene by any chance? Like, would we be able to take a look at the, because I think it's a really cool effect, because it is really hard to get like dust particles on a character without it looking like it's sort of just a flat image that was masked.
Yeah, let me see if I can get one up. I should have one somewhere. And when I look for this, you can like ask another question because it might take me a little bit.
Yeah, well, earlier we were talking about like how some of the character designs developed. What were some of the inspirations behind the character designs that you went with?
So one of the big, ooh, that is a terrible quality. One of the big inspirations for my film in particular was Little Witch Academia. I really love that series. It's very sweet, and also I love like the effects animation because I really wanted to have fun, kind of like anime style effects, and so I really kind of pushed through that. And I loved how vibrant the characters were in that, and so that was a big like inspiration. And but I really wanted to work in like American cartoons, so I kind of tried to push the characters more in that direction. Actually, like I totally would have used like the Owl House as a big inspiration, but it actually hadn't premiered yet when I started working on it. So we used it a little bit later for just for some reference. But here is one of the scenes with like the dust. And so like I had it on the glasses themselves and each of the like different elements like the hair, the face, and different parts of like the different parts of the character's outfit were just hand drawn and then moved separately each frame on a peg. And so actually it wasn't even on a peg. I think I copied and pasted and then adjusted things how I wanted, like how it could move. And so that was one of the more difficult things to figure out compositing wise. Like it's definitely not perfect. Like there's things I would have like loved to spend more time figuring out and like making more how I wanted. But I think it definitely works for how I wanted it to.
I think it's a really impressive effect. And for the dust cloud too, was that particles or were those hand drawn and blurred?
Oh, so the dust cloud, that was one of the few things I did in After Effects. I used like their particle world thing. I attempted to do it in Toon Boom and got really intimidated by the particles. So I decided to save that for a later learning experience and just follow a tutorial.
Yeah, Harmony has a really fun particle system, but
Yeah.
it is a lot to get into, especially
Yeah.
if you already have a whole student project on top of that too.
Yeah, I played with it a little bit, and I loved like how it visualized the 3D aspect of it. That was really cool, but I just couldn't get it to the speed and like consistency I wanted.
I want to ask if you've worked on any other projects you'd like to mention on the stream.
Yeah, so I've just started working as cleanup artist on Ollie and Scoops, which is a really cute YouTube series by Nico Kualeo. I think I said that right. I'm sorry, Nico. And it's just a very cute and fun, very zany animated cartoon. And I'm really excited to work on it just because it's so different from what I am used to. Because Toil and Trouble, I'd say, is much more closer to my style. It has these textured lines. It's definitely a like kind of rougher kind of cleanup. And Ollie and Scoops is very clean and kind of much more like most cartoons today. And so it was a big challenge to try and learn that different style.
And how did you come to find out about this production?
That was through Twitter, actually. Nico just posted on Twitter that he was looking for cleanup artists and animators, and I just posted a link to my stuff, and I'm like, hey, I'd love to help. And he messaged me from that, and so it just worked out from there, and that was really exciting because it's really like the first kind of step into like this really big, fun world of animation for me.
That's so cool. And for those who haven't seen the series, what is Ollie and Scoops about?
It's about a little girl named Ollie and her cat Scoops, and their fun, exciting like adventures in their town with all the crazy town folk. One of the episodes we're working on has like just this absolutely funny looking dude, and he's just, I can't tell if he like wants to be a cat or is just really loves cats, but he is like that kind of person, and it's just very fun.
And was there anything about your film that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to ask you about yet?
Hmm. Not that I can think of. I feel like I went through like kind of most of it. Like there's definitely like lots to the compositing pipeline that like is like just more like the technical parts. Like right here, like we have like a little glow effect that was like just really quickly added, but it was a really big part of like the monster because it has that fun kind of powerful effect. And like as well as like in like the compositing, like with this scene, like with Dorothea, this was one of the more complicated ones because like she had like that pink light going on her, and so I had to like figure out how to make that like really look like it's like this fill light, but not have it be too overwhelming like this. And so it really was a lot of just layering more and more things and having some transparency and then some more tone and then even some brightness and contrast. And so I think that was like one of the most fun things was figuring out those layers and just making it look kind of, I don't know, magical. That was my main goal with it.
And I think we also wanted to just have a quick comparison of what it looks like in the render view versus the OpenGL view.
Oh, yes. Here, let me turn these on real quick. So here is like the full render view of this shot. And like, obviously, like that's easier to like manipulate because you can see exactly what you want to see and like you can easily move around the things that you're working with. It will take a little bit more time because it just has to render each time, unless you use like render preview because that will help as well. But when you're in OpenGL view, even though it goes a little bit faster, it looks like this. And so that's a little bit harder to see what you're doing since everything's kind of on top of each other. It looks kind of fun though.
You do lose some of the blurs and the sort of fast preview view. We got a few questions in the chat. First would be, how much time during production, on average, would you dedicate to working on this project, either in animation or in the compositing phase? What did an average day sort of look like?
It kind of depended on where we were in the process. Like towards the end on compositing, I did most of the compositing just because I kind of figured it out, and it was kind of such a unique process that was very specific and it all had to match that it was kind of hard to teach that to my team, especially overseas when we couldn't contact super well. And so the rest of my team were working on like other things that they could do in the meantime while I did some compositing. And towards the end, like when I was trying to finish everything up all at once, along with like painting backgrounds, those were 8 hours a day, like 7 days a week. I am very careful about not overworking myself because I have chronic arm issues and hand issues like most artists. So trying not to like overdo it and burn myself out. But it's definitely a lot of work. Like the animation itself, those take several days of full working, and it's definitely a lot of work, but spreading it out, making sure you follow a schedule and figuring out how fast you can work is like important, like knowing your speed and working around that.
It helps you plan. It sort of is, well, when's this going to get done? Another question that came in was, how did you think about color in these scenes? Because I clearly like pinks and golds were a big sort of were important for this sort of scene that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. So I can show a little bit of what I have for that. So I worked on a color script for our film. I knew that I wanted pink to be kind of the danger color because pink isn't usually a danger color, and I wanted that to kind of like show through. And I kind of wanted the entire film to be like this kind of gradient of like kind of descending into chaos. So like the beginning is a little less saturated, a little bit brighter, and then it gets darker, more saturated, and just like we have like all these very bright pinks. And so I kind of chose colors that I wanted to like focus on. And then I just kind of went from there. And of course it was like the layout artist that really took that. And well, actually the background painter is layout artist, kind of the same thing because same person. But they really took that and like the color script and kind of made that even better and really kind of pushed that, especially like with this lovely lighting here. This is by Arca 2. He helped out a lot. Thank you. Or they.
And I wanted to also ask, was there any feedback you got from your instructors that was particularly helpful?
A lot of what helped with the instructors was actually through when I was still pitching it, still working on the pitch, and that was about like pacing. So when I was originally working on the storyboard, I think I had maybe 60, 70, or 80 cuts in the film. And like, I knew that was too much. I'm like, this is a lot. This feels not good. It's just everywhere. And so I sat down with one of my instructors and he gave me this really fantastic advice of watching through the Sorcerer's Apprentice and just counting out the cuts. I think I stuck, sorry, there is an unknown cat in our yard. I do know that cat. It sneaks into our house. Sorry. But so I took the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Yeah, we have a cat and it's not that one. And so I just counted every cut, put a marker for every single time it changed a cut. And I realized like, wow, there's an entire cut here that lasts for like a minute. And like my cuts, I think the longest what I had was maybe like 2 seconds. And that changed a lot for me because now we have one that's 13 or 14 seconds. And I even did math for that, which is like crazy for me, like doing math for like, so this is a 7-minute film or something, and this is a 3-minute. And so trying to figure out that ratio of how many cuts would kind of make sense for this. And so that helped so much with the pacing because it made me a lot more picky about what shots I wanted and making the shots more impactful so that they could be useful for a longer shot.
All right, Kira, thank you so much for giving us a tour of your scene and for talking us through the process behind your short film. I wanted to ask, where can our viewers go to watch Toil and Trouble?
So I have a link on my website. That's the only place it can be right now because it's still in the festival circuit, but you're welcome to watch it there.
Right, and we'll include links in the show notes so that people are able to find your website and pages. I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us for today's interview. If anyone's interested in using Harmony or Storyboard Pro for their student films, be sure to visit toonboom.com/students. We have really good student discounts, and I'm really excited to see the next batch of student films that come out this year.
Me too. It's so good.
Until next time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very fun.